That's why really the vast majority of our business support comes from the smoke shops in Arizona. I mean, that's something that when we were writing this initiative, we wanted to be very mindful of, is to keep the smoke shops protected. Giving the smoke shops to the dispensaries, that's bad for the smoke shops and it's bad for the consumers. You know, they can charge whatever they want for this glass, and you're not going to get necessarily the best glass pieces because you're just going to get what they're blowing. And it's just the possibilities are endless, of course. But so for that reason, of course, the smoke shops love us, and we're actually going to be meeting with one down here today, I think, hopefully. But across the state, we've just got tons of support from the smoke shops. There, of course, are lots of other differences between our issues. And actually, if you don't have one, I did bring a couple comparison charts. Anybody would like one? These comparison charts, I say they're gold because, you know, obviously the number one question we get is what are the differences between the two campaigns?
Are these the new ones with the changes that you guys, you know, kind of have?
Actually, these are the ones that were printed prior to the change.
Prior? Did you guys
There's only one change that we're making.
I still have that one. I just wanted to see.
The one change that we're making is to say that under the cultivation of marijuana penalties for MPP's initiative, it might not include a mandatory prison sentence if the weight of the marijuana plants is less than 2 pounds. The reason we had to change that is because, unfortunately, MPP's initiative doesn't actually define what a marijuana plant is. And so, hypothetically, law enforcement could choose to decide that, under their initiative, that a marijuana plant is a marijuana seed. And obviously, if you had 7 marijuana seeds, that would be less than 2 pounds, so it wouldn't actually be a mandatory prison sentence. We want the chart to be accurate.
Is ours worded like the AMMA, that parts of the plant that are peripheral to mature flowers are exempted?
Their initiative doesn't say anything like that. It just says that the mature stems and stalks.
Ours.
Our initiative does, right. Our initiative actually defines marijuana and a marijuana plant. And so, in our initiative, a marijuana plant is defined as any plant of the genus cannabis with a living root system attached to the plant. Now, we wrote it like that so that law enforcement couldn't come in and start snapping off branches off a big bush and claim that you now have 8 plants or 12 or 15 plants or whatever it might be. And so, obviously, we wanted, because we've seen this happen actually in numerous cases,
But
even my own case.
My question is, water leaf, stems, seeds, are they considered in the quantity of, well, in this one it's...
In our initiative, that would be marijuana. It would be defined as marijuana. And at your home, you can...
not.
Right. So in our initiative, you can grow 12 plants at home and possess any amount of marijuana that is produced by those 12 plants.
Oh, okay, good.
Right, so at home, it would be a non-issue. Any of that marijuana that you have, it would be legal and you could possess as much of it as you want. Which was a serious flaw with the Medical Marijuana Act.
Yeah.
The Medical Marijuana Act, as many of you know, allows patients to grow 12 plants, but only possess 2.5 ounces of marijuana, even at their house. And who among us decides how much marijuana comes from a marijuana plant? Who decides how many oranges come from an orange tree, right? I mean, it's just, it didn't make any sense, and it set people up for failure. Of course, a lot of people have been prosecuted and arrested for that provision alone. And we don't want to make that mistake again. And so again, there's actually lots of different points here in this comparison chart that make our initiative different. The biggest point, of course, is decriminalization. In our initiative, when you break the law, it's a misdemeanor rather than a felony. And of course, in the MPP initiative, when you break the law, it resorts back to the existing marijuana laws that we have that make the penalties a felony. So obviously, in that way, it's not really a step forward at all. It's really just, I think, as Dave's described it, a jailbait initiative. We call it the free cheese in the mousetrap. Again, another Dave.
Now I'm calling it the bait on the hook.
Yeah, and it really is. Every one of those is an accurate description because MPP's initiative, as Tom Dean described it, makes marijuana just legal enough for the average consumer to get themselves thrown in prison. And it really is that way, unfortunately. You know, under their initiative, you could grow 6 plants, but growing the 7th plant, as we said, would be class 4 felony with a likely mandatory prison sentence. That's not right. A lot of people are going to accidentally grow a 7th plant, especially since a plant isn't defined in their initiative. Right. Yeah.
So I know that, if you grow that 7 plants, I think, I should be correct on this, that everything that you're protected by their initiative, you know, goes away and it goes back to the felony. So
Yes.
are you charged with the rest of whatever else is grown?
Unfortunately, right, so if you had 6 plants and 500 pounds of marijuana at your home, you would be legal. If you had 7 plants and 500 pounds, you'd be charged with growing 7 plants and possession of 500 pounds. And that's from an existing court case called Chase v. Fields, where the courts have ruled that once you violate the Medical Marijuana Act in any way, you immediately lose all of the remaining protections afforded to you under the Act. And at one of the points on the back of our chart here is just this point. We included a protection of rights provision that specifically says that under our initiative, if you violate the law in any way, you don't lose any of the remaining protections that you currently have. So in our initiative, if you grew 13 plants instead of 12, which is what's allowed, you would be charged with growing 1 plant, which would be a class 3 misdemeanor. Awesome, right? I mean, that's the way it should be. And so you don't lose any of your protections, and that's obviously important for a lot of reasons. In MPP's initiative, they also make it illegal to consume marijuana in public, even if that's eating edibles, or vaporizing, or using a lotion. If you're caught doing that, you will be charged under MPP's initiative with both consuming marijuana in public and a felony for possession of marijuana. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. It's going to really set people up for failure. And that's really the core reason why we exist in the first place. Our group worked with MPP, and a lot of you already know this, for, I think we've figured out now, it's about 8-9 months that we're behind. And we worked with them to ensure that their initiative included the language that we're talking about here, the consumer protections. Ultimately, the short version is that they were slaves to the highest bidder. The medical marijuana dispensaries paid for their initiative and wrote their own language that protects their financial interests, but doesn't actually protect any of us who actually smoke marijuana. And in fact, as you've probably heard already, we've said a few times, we think it's actually a step backwards in a lot of different ways. And of course, again, we refer to the chart every time because the chart is gold. Each of these points is just as important as the next. But of course, the decriminalization is probably the biggest point. The second biggest point, and we've been harping on this a lot lately, is the medical marijuana program. Our initiative keeps the medical marijuana program with DHS. So any patient rights that you have today as a medical patient will remain intact once we legalize marijuana. Unfortunately, MPP's initiative gives the medical marijuana program, takes it from DHS and gives it to the new Department of Marijuana Licenses and Control. And that department would be run in part by the existing medical marijuana dispensary owners. So the dispensary owners would have control to change the medical marijuana program in any way they see fit. And again, that's a serious conflict of interest. To allow the people who make the money to make the rules would set a very dangerous precedent for patient rights. So that's one of the biggest things that we've been harping on here is our new Sign Today to Save MMJ campaign. We've also got some flyers that we've been handing out here that kind of explain why the medical marijuana program is actually under attack.
Quick question. So I know that the marijuana, that the medical marijuana program is going to stay with who they're with currently. Will you guys have any influence on extending the qualifications on who can become a patient?
No. In fact, that's one of the things that we're really trying to focus on is not changing the medical program at all. Okay. And I know that perhaps we could change the program to really make it better. In a lot of ways, our recreational marijuana bill will make the medical marijuana program make more sense. As I mentioned earlier, the medical program says you can grow 12 plants, but only possess 2.5 ounces. So with both programs in place, both our initiative and the medical program, now a patient can grow 12 plants as a patient if they're authorized to cultivate. If they're not authorized to cultivate, they can still grow 12 plants as recreational plants and possess any amount of marijuana. So, I mean, in a lot of cases, it puts a Band-Aid on some of the problems in the medical program, but it doesn't change it at all. And we'd like to change it going forward in years to come. But in this initiative, we want to focus on decriminalization, legalization, regulation, and really having a program that makes sense. And also, of course, protecting the medical program, because it's not perfect, but we don't want to lose the rights that we have. And I was asked the other day, you know, well, what do you think is going to change if MPP's initiative were to pass and they get control of the medical program? Well, there's a few things they're going to change. They're going to change the ability to be able to transfer and sell dispensary licenses. Places like Bloom have 5 locations around the state, but they want 50. So they're going to change that immediately. They're going to change a lot of things like the purchasing limits. We think that they will change the medical marijuana dispensary purchasing limits to match the recreational program. So in MPP's initiative, you would only be able to buy 1 ounce of marijuana from a dispensary or 5 grams of concentrated marijuana. You would not be able to buy any more from a dispensary at one time. Currently, as a medical patient, you can buy 2.5 ounces at one time. But we think they'll change the medical program so that medical patients will also only be able to buy 1 ounce or 5 grams of concentrates. And so, of course, that's going to harm patients. We think they're also going to raise the cost of patient cards to discourage people from trying to get the card simply to avoid the tax or this purchasing limit that I just talked about. MPP's initiative would essentially tax marijuana, recreational marijuana, at 25% tax, whereas medical marijuana is only subject to the local sales tax, which is about 9%, I think, around here, 9.3 if I somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it's just 6.
Is it? Okay, well maybe I'm thinking Phoenix. I'm trying to keep up with all these city sales
I
taxes.
think the extra in Phoenix is a local Phoenix tax.
Yeah, we've got Phoenix, county, city, county, and state, right? And so that makes up the entire sales tax. And in Phoenix, that's 9.3%. So MPP's proposing to tax marijuana at that sales tax plus 15%. So that would be about 24.3% tax. And so MPP, we think, back to my original point, we think that if their initiative were to pass, the dispensary owners would change the medical program to raise the card fees so that you don't try and just get your medical card so you don't have to pay that luxury tax. And so we think that that's inevitable. There's of course a lot of other changes that we could speculate about, but we don't know. The point is that that stuff can be argued, but what can't be argued is that it's a conflict of interest to give the medical program to the dispensary owners, knowing that they might change the program to suit their own financial interests. Now, I mentioned earlier that we actually work with MPP and this core group of dispensaries, it's 30 dispensaries that supports MPP's campaign. We work with them, and we know their motivations. Their motivations are not to protect the marijuana consumers. In fact, they fought very hard against grow rights being included at all because they, in their own email, freely admit that they feel that's going to take away from their financial
They
bottom
yanked them. We had to boycott dispensaries just to get those 6 plants.
It wasn't MPP that took it to grow rights.
It wasn't. It was the dispensary owners who, and we have emails from the dispensary owners admitting that, you know, yeah, we don't want grow rights because it takes away from our bottom line. If you can grow marijuana at your home, you're going to share it with them. And if you get some share with you, you're going to want to share it with me. And you're not going to buy from the dispensary as much. Now, what they don't understand is that you guys and me will all still buy from the dispensaries if they're good dispensaries. You know, the DHS stats for the medical program show that 30% of our patients shop at dispensaries. So where are the other 70% of these patients getting their marijuana, right?
But at the same time, what the dispensary owners don't realize, and they're not telling, is you could be growing, you could be growing, you could be growing, Dave could be growing, but the dispensary wanting the best product to attract business is going to do business with you, and maybe not him, might do it with him, but not Dave. And
Right.
The free market's going to naturally make it to where people buy at what they could afford, and people will always pay more for better quality.
Consumers dictate this market. That's something dispensary owners have a huge disconnect with understanding. They try to apply normal retail psychology and consumers to this. It's not a box of cereal.
Right, and it's true that our initiative will drive down the cost of marijuana on the street, and as such, it will drive down the retail cost. Now, I know I'm not talking to a group of dispensary owners here, so I'm sure that sounds great to us, right? Like lower costs of marijuana. The dispensary owners disagree. You can tell I'm not a dispensary owner either, right? So we think that's a great thing. But what they don't understand is that with the lower costs of marijuana and everybody over 21 being able to purchase it, they're going to buy more. They're going to be smoking more. I mean, more people are going to be purchasing it. It's available to more people now. And so, of course, we think that's a great thing that we're driving down the cost of marijuana. As you mentioned, we're opening up the market. And that's another big difference between our initiative and MPP's initiative, is the licensing. In MPP's initiative, they say that only the existing medical marijuana dispensary owners will be guaranteed any of the recreational marijuana business licenses. Obviously, I just mentioned that only 30% of our patients are shopping at the existing dispensaries. So with that in mind, giving the recreational market to these same group of 89 dispensaries is not going to be beneficial. The black market would blow up overnight. And of course, in their initiative, people who participate in the black market will be given a felony and taken to prison. So of course, that's not appropriate. We need to open up the market, as you mentioned. We need the free market. We need the people who, as I mentioned to Jason on the way up here, he kind of laughed at me, but it's true. The guy who sells weed right now, who doesn't have a dispensary license, sells weed, he's been selling weed for the past 5-10 years. MPP thinks he belongs in prison. We think he should get a license. We really do. If you love weed and you want to sell marijuana, and you want to grow marijuana, then get a license. And so in our initiative, we say that there can be up to 1,500 marijuana retailer licenses and an unlimited amount of cultivator and product manufacturing licenses. So what this means is that the cities and counties can decide where these businesses will be able to locate. Most likely it'll be in industrial areas. But as many people that want to get the license to participate will be able to do so under our initiative. And so obviously that implies that anybody out of state who is not an existing dispensary owner, or anybody in state, maybe some of us here, who would like to do business once we legalize and have a marijuana license, they love our initiative. And in MPP's initiative, unless you own an existing dispensary, you're out of luck. And so, of course, with that in mind, we're real people. I mentioned earlier that we actually only have, I think, 4 dispensaries that are currently supporting our initiative. And we understand